There we are. It says we're live. Morning again. I hope we're live. I'm going to keep an eye on LinkedIn until it tells me that we're live as well. That's when I start believing. I'm going to be talking this morning to John Scotcher. John is creator of Tovi, the e-learning platform which I'm proud to use for the networking retreat, for Connect, for everything else that we do. John's the creator of that. He's got a load of expertise in bringing e-learning to small businesses. There you go. I can see that we're live. By the way, if you can see me, do say hello down in the comments. If you've got any questions for John, hello Jay Blake, it's nice to see you. I'll tell you what, actually, let's do this before I bring John on screen. If you can see me looking down, it's because I act as my own tech op as well as actually doing the talky bit. So there you go. I've just tagged John in that. We have got... Jay, you're going to come up with private user. It's just one of those funny things that LinkedIn does. It's in your security settings somewhere. Roland Millward, you're not. You're going to come up like that. I've got some old intro music, and actually, Roland, Jay Blake, and John Scotcher, I think you're going to recognise this. I'm just going to play this briefly for a laugh before I bring John on screen to talk about e-learning. You enjoyed that as much as me, by the look of it. Morning, John.
Lovely.
I like doing stuff like this. Oh, we've already got... I'm going to actually pop this up on screen because I'm going to be talking to John Scotcher about e-learning and online courses, and Jim Rowe Bot, amusingly on LinkedIn, is considering launching a course. So this will be a great conversation for us to have. I've known you, John, for 13 years, 14 years, something like that.
Yeah.
For the benefit of people who are watching or listening to us and don't know you, just go ahead and explain who you are and what you do.
Okie dokie. When I first met you, Stefan, I was wearing my Pearson Treehouse web design hat, which is the company I've been running since 1999 and still run, designing and building websites. On the back of that, I've got my Tovi e-learning brand, which is a standalone e-learning platform, web-based, that I built initially for one of my clients because they were very disappointed with the platforms they've been using. And a little way through the process of building it, I suddenly thought, oh, wait a second, this would be really useful for lots of people. So I said to the client, you know what, I'm going to give you a really good deal on this, but I'm keeping the license, and hence Tovi e-learning was born. And Tovi essentially is an e-learning platform that everybody has their own copies. So when you sign up to Tovi, you have your own branded copy that looks like your company. So you're not pushing Teachable's brand or LinkedIn Training's brand, you're pushing your own brand. The only courses that are on your copy of Tovi e-learning are your courses. And hence it enables a business to have their own e-learning portal that they can then push all of their own stuff on without having to be lost in the mire of some of the larger platforms. And it has a me behind it to help you out and enables you to have it customized to work with your business model, so on and so forth.
I was wondering if you were going to mention other companies who do similar things. I think one of the reasons that I chose Tovi is because you're behind it. That was an obvious choice for me, because if I can do business with a mate, if I can do business with someone who I know and can phone, that makes a ton more sense to me. Teachable is a fine platform, don't get me wrong, but it
Absolutely.
makes a ton more sense to me to have an actual person who I can pick up and talk to. So Jim Rowe mentioned to me much earlier on in the year, or even the end of last year, that he was thinking of launching a course. So that gives us something to talk about right away. for someone like Jim, who specializes in chatbot software and chatbot automation. Jim, pull me up if I'm not getting that right, but that's what I understand about your business. How can someone get their course up online? How can they make that happen with Toby?
Sure. Well, there's a few things to say. I won't talk specifically about Toby because I think there's some use that I can give people about courses in general rather than just telling you how wonderful my platform is. It is, by the way. Um, so it's important to think about why you are putting a course online. Um, it's quite hard to move around social media, particularly business social media at the moment, without slamming into an online course guru who will, for 5, 10 grand, teach you their method of creating online courses and thus give you a fantastic passive source of income. And there are some of those who are very good, and there are a lot more who maybe are not quite as good. Um, I think the holy grail of an online course that makes you entirely passive income is very hard to get to. Um, for a start, it's not passive income because much as the course might be online and people can do that remotely, you've then got all the marketing to do with it. So to be honest with you, it will never be quite the holy grail that certain gurus would have you believe. Where online courses, to my mind, really help a business in the first instance is if a business is engaged in what I call rinse and repeat training, where they're doing the same thing over and over and again with lots of different clients. So, for example, with me, when I'm doing the website stuff, I use a particular content management system. And before e-learning, I would teach that client live time and time again by driving to their office or doing it via Zoom, etc., how to work that content management system so they knew. Now, of course, I've got that entirely as an e-learning course. So that is hours and hours of my time clawed back by not having to do that. And actually, that's now also gone live as a course that people who use that content management system can take whether or not they're one of my clients. So then, as a secondary thing, it has started to bring in a certain amount of passive income. But it's always useful to consider with an online course, as a first instance, where can that course help you claw back time and claw back money and resources because you're no longer driving somewhere, spending time on Zoom, etc., etc. And if you can get a solid foundation using e-learning with that as your benchmark, it's a very good place to then start going, well, I've done that now, I've got time coming back. Now, how can I potentially start doing some courses that will also earn money? I've got the time now to start doing the marketing with it, etc. So that's just my own thoughts on what I've seen with e-learning courses that are successful both on Toby and on other platforms. In terms of a first course, I would absolutely recommend the likes of Teachable. In fact, Teachable is very good. There's a couple of freebies. If you've got a WordPress website, I do feel sorry for you, but if you've got a WordPress website, then you can get a fairly good plugin. I forget the name of it, but there's a plugin that you can then put your course online entirely for free. The point I'm making here is, unless you're a training company or you've got lots of experience with teaching, you don't want to be spending a small fortune on your first e-learning course whilst you're testing the water. That's a really good time to use one of the budget options, test the water, make sure you're able to create a course, make sure people are interested in the course you've created. And then when you can see the revenue streams, you can see the time savings, etc., then move on to a platform where you can have multiple courses, etc., etc.
It actually helped me. The conversations with you last year, and I don't know if we've talked about this, but we'll talk about it publicly now. But the conversations with you last year helped me to launch Connect, which is my mentoring and networking group that you're a member of, because I was running the Networking Success Program, which I ran live several times last year. Realised that I actually really like doing live stuff. I really enjoy doing live stuff. I believe I'm very good at it. I enjoy this sort of interaction with people, and yet what that's led me to be able to do is have something where I give bespoke advice to people. So when I have conversations with people, I help them specifically with what they're dealing with. That's what Connect is about. And they, members, have access to the Networking Success Program, which I used to sell and run live several times a year. They've got continual access to it. Now, we started off doing that simply with a YouTube playlist, as you know, and we're now migrating that onto Tovi, so that whenever anyone joins Connect, I can then email them and say, look, you've got these 6 modules, they're yours, go and look at them. What that's meant for me is that the repetitive stuff, how to put together your networking introduction, how to follow up with people, the repetitive advice is there and accessible 24/7, which means that the live conversations that I'm having are much more bespoke and tailor-made and relevant for that person. You know, hey Steph, I've listened, I've watched the Networking Success Program. I know that this is the template you recommend for the 40 seconds, but I don't think that works for my business. It's helped me, bizarrely, to do more of the live stuff, which I really enjoy doing and what the business has become, by having all of the repetitive stuff easily accessible to people in the background. So I'm not just delivering the same advice over and over again to people. It's made my conversations more meaningful. I've probably not explained it like that before.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah, I realised I'm not that guru who wants a ton of online courses out there, because what I enjoy doing is the live stuff, but actually for consistency, having a lot of the repetitive advice there on Tovi has actually enabled that, which is a slightly different way of coming at it, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And funnily enough, you're not the only one of my Tovi clients that's gone down that route. One that I always find interesting, I've got a guitar teacher on Toby, which initially you'd kind of think, well, that's odd. How would that work? But what he actually does, he's probably got upwards of 25 courses on there, because what he does is he creates a bespoke private course for every single one of his students. He then does the live lessons with them and then uploads that live lesson into their bespoke private course. So they can go back into their own bespoke private course anytime and watch all of the one-to-one lessons they've done with him over and over again. So it really helps them with the practice, etc. And that use of it and taking advantage of what's known as the repository course, which is a non-assessed course where you could just put a repository of anything that you've done live. I didn't see that coming until he came up with that as an idea. One of the things that I always do with my Tovi clients, and it's the great thing about being able to work directly with the clients, is if somebody comes to me and goes, John, look, our business model needs this thing to happen. If I can see a merit in that being built and then put into the core system so everyone can use it, I think so far 4 or 5 times I've ended up doing that and not charging the client that came up with it for any bespoke work, because it's benefited everybody and improved my product. So it's really good to be able to work very much one-to-one with people and get their best ideas and use them.
This is becoming a business development meeting for my business, actually. Just before I go where I'm going to go, if Jim, Roland, Jay, anyone else who's watching, if you've got any questions for John or me about e-learning, how John creates it and how I use it, if you want, please pop them in the comments below, and we'll answer them. I'm going to be live with John for about half an hour now, because he's got to go off and do something rather more important after that. We'll talk about that in a second if you don't end up pulling all your hair out. But if anyone's got any questions, pop them down below. You've just given me the best idea ever, because as you well know, every time I have a one-to-one with someone, I have recording automatically set up on Zoom. Of course. I've then got Dropbox set up to suck the recordings out of Zoom and put them in Dropbox folders. And with members of Connect, where we have mentoring meetings, advice meetings, one-to-one, that idea of having all of them in a repository for that individual member,
Absolutely.
that's a genius idea.
Yeah, it works a treat. When we're off call at some point, I'll show you the guitar site so you can see how it's working for him.
I asked
Sorry,
for
everyone.
I asked for question. Yeah, do I asked for
Ah,
questions
Nigel.
about it, and Michael Nails has said hair. Lol. Um,
Are you
so
jealous of us both, Michael?
yeah, I live with a hairdresser. John doesn't. I think let's leave that one there. Yeah, where was I going with that? I'll tell you what I was going to say. Actually, before anyone's got any questions, if you haven't yet connected with John on LinkedIn, please do. He's not difficult to find. There's his LinkedIn there. I'll bring Tovi back up on the screen as well. And there's Tovi. That's where you'll find Tovi as well. The website explains all about it, and hardly surprisingly, there are videos there that you can watch to explain how to use it as well. If I'm looking, no one knows that I'm looking down actually at this point. I didn't have to explain that. If I am looking down at any point, it's because I've managing all of this as well as talking to you folk. So as well as someone like me who has mentoring and networking clients and a guitar teacher, what other sort of businesses have you got using Tovi at the moment?
Sure. Well, I've got, I think, 4 coaches now of various flavors from business to life. Um, and they're using it for, again, some of their rinse and repeat training. But it's in one of the things that I recommend, again, with any e learning platform you go on, if it has a live aspect to it, as in you can engage live with the students in one to ones as well as doing the pre recorded stuff, then any single course that you've got is actually something you can leverage twice, because you can do the single entirely remote course where there's none of you in the course at price A, and then create an identical second version, but add in a final module, which is a live one-to-one, and then put that at price B. So that's a really good way of doing the same thing twice, and then giving your viewership the choice of, well, do I want to spend do this entirely remotely, or do I actually want to do the course and then really take advantage of what I've learned by having a one-to-one with the person that's taught me on the course and asking them some questions. So that was just an aside. In addition to the coaches, where that kind of thing works quite well, um, the other area that I'm tending to find I'm getting a lot of interest in and getting a few on is existing training companies. So I went through a process a few weeks ago. I'm sure many of us have been through it, where one imagines one ideal client. I can't remember what mine was called, but I'm going to call him Jack today. And so, to give you an idea, Jack owns a training company that deals with training transport fleets. He goes in and he sits the transport drivers down and he explains to them why they shouldn't get drunk the night before they've got to drive their truck, because they'll still be illegal the next morning. And that's compliance training. Before COVID, Jack was going into their places of work and training 10, 15 people at a time. Since COVID, he's been doing it in Zoom, and he's got to a stage that he's quite successful, everything's going well, and he needs to expand. He can't necessarily afford a new member of staff to do what he's doing, but what he can afford is to get a copy of Tovi and put that rinse and repeat training as an e-course or a couple of e-courses, depending on what he does, and then he can say to his big companies, do you want me to come in at this price, or would you prefer to have a private course for 40 of your staff at this price? So those kind of health and safety, HR, fire safety, any kind of compliance training, when they're often going into larger companies and doing that training, is really one of the areas I'm looking at. And likewise, I've got a couple of larger companies that use Tovi to onboard their staff. So the new staff member arrives, the first thing they do is they sit down and they go through, I've even once got a simple course of a video going around the building, showing them where the fire exits and the loos and stuff are as part of the onboarding. And again, that kind of thing works great.
Yeah, I was getting to onboarding just at the same point as you were because I
Mm.
was thinking about one of my clients who's got multiple offices in the UK, and actually putting a video together just showing the various offices and that sort of thing. And also multinational companies where the boss may be very remote, a welcome from the ultimate boss would be,
Yeah.
yeah, all of that makes a ton of sense. I remember 1988 when I started my first full-time job with Allen and Harris, the estate agents. We all used to have to bundle over to Swindon,
Mm.
and read,
How
like
awful.
literally read a load of memorandum
Mm.
about how to do different things in the company, and so dress code. That, that was one. The company had a dress code that we had to adhere to. That sort of thing. It makes very little sense to have people have to go all the way to Swindon and sit in a room and read stuff like that anymore. I imagine all of that could be delivered, compliance type courses. Plus, I believe that Tovi gives you the option to actually note that someone's actually
Yeah,
completed
and
that part of the course.
funnily enough, I was going to move on to that. That's absolutely the case. Um, there are two kinds of course, and this is very much a generalization. Obviously, there are many types of course, but for the purposes of this conversation, there are two types of course: those that people want to take and those that people don't want to take. And we would be naive to assume that everybody who goes to a compliance based course or is being onboarded by their new company is desperate to take the courses they're being put on. Hence, any kind of e-learning in those scenarios is going to work does need forms of assessment within it to basically tick the boxes. Um, at the very least, with any e-learning platform, you should have some kind of multiple choice quiz, something like that, just so that you can do that. Toby's got multiple choice quiz. It's got a way of not allowing you to pass the module until the video is finished. So you have to sit there through the entire video. Now, of course, that's great for the intro ones, but having a video playing doesn't mean the person's not left the room to make a cup of tea. So the multiple choice quiz is a good way of doing it. Toby actually has a couple of other ones. Uh, it was originally the company that was designed and built for were an academic company. As a consequence, one of the assessment types is to be able to upload coursework, which I've been surprised at how many non-academic uses that's turned out to have.
Yeah.
So it could be upload an essay, which is what it was originally designed for, but equally upload an Excel spreadsheet with the calculations done, whatever it happens to be, and then that gets manually, or that gets sent to a tutor that is the tutor in charge of the course, who can then manually mark that and then manually pass the student on to the next module. And then finally, as I already mentioned, there's the kind of live one-to-one where effectively at the end of that one-to-one, which is booked via Calendly or that kind of thing, the tutor would then again go back to the course platform, manually pass that student saying yes, they've done to the one-to-one and they've ticked all the boxes that I needed them to, and thus the student can move on to the next module. So anything compliance wise, do make sure you have got an ability to check the people you need it to do the course are actually doing it and taking notice of what they're watching.
Yeah, I'm not trying to do anyone out of what I imagine is a relatively simple, easy piece of business, but I was actually thinking about driver awareness courses,
Mm,
speed awareness courses on that one, because
yeah.
effectively I imagine everyone sits through broadly the same information.
Yeah.
These days, sadly, I do know, to my shame, you do them on Zoom, and you keep the camera on so that they can see that you're there. But equally, I would imagine a much more cost effective way of doing that sort of thing would be to do it with an exam or that sort of thing at the end. And
Yeah,
then,
yeah, yeah.
on a slightly happier note, when I work with people, then talking about my business again, on their 40 or 60-second introduction, I could have them, and I haven't thought about this before, I could have them write that and upload it to me as they complete that part of the course.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's led me to think, again, biz dev for my business, it's led me to think about having the networking success program available for people to buy, with then an upsell into Connect as part of that deal if they want the one-to-one interaction as you've mentioned one of your other client uses.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If anyone's got any questions for John, pop them in below. Damien has asked a brilliant and relevant question for people with disabilities. How accessible is it? That's basically Damien's question. Damien, who I know really well, and thank you for giving us your time, Damien. I know you're busy. Damien's a wheelchair user who has other mobility issues as well. I know, for example, that Damien uses speech to text for a lot of his stuff as well. So yeah, in those terms, how accessible is it?
Well, as Damien will probably already know, then a lot of accessibility is down to good web development and knowing what you need to do in the background. And yeah, it's something that annoys me if I don't see it, because yeah, it's like good SEO. You shouldn't be paying extra for it. It's part of the process. But yes, because Toby is entirely bespoke, it very much depends on the client and what they want. So I've got a couple of charities at the moment that accessibility is an important thing for them, and we work on their websites that I do for them. I'm looking up at my browser here because I've got the accessibility plugin, but typically it's not on screen at the moment. But in simple terms, yes, everything that you need for a screen reader, for all that kind of things, for the high contrast colors, etc. Because each copy of Toby is in effect a white labeled, and it gets branded as the company and customized for the company that's using it, then it makes it very easy for that company to say to me, actually, our users are going to have these specific needs, so can we put something in to make it work for those specific needs?
Yeah, I think I'm going to suggest this, and I'm relatively sure you don't mind. I think if Damien's got really specific questions about the accessibility, either pop them in the comments below, Damien, or do connect with John and ask him in a message. I know John really well, and I know he'll welcome that, because obviously if you've got a specific question about it, Damien, I bet other people have got the same question as well. So these things help us all out. Where should people find you, John? On that note, if people want to connect with you and ask you questions about Toby, where would be the best place for them to find you?
LinkedIn is my weapon of choice. That's always where I tend to hang out when it comes to business side of things. We've talked about this before, Steph, I know, but about 3 years ago, I made what at the time felt like quite a controversial decision. And that was that I ditched all of my business contacts that I'd spent the previous 10 years building on Facebook, and I've slowly been building them back up on LinkedIn, so that now when I go to Facebook, it's just my friends and family that I see. And actually that's lovely, because there was quite a long time that I wasn't enjoying Facebook, because it just felt like one more business thing. And as you know, Steph, I'm a huge advocate of work-life balance. And so reclaiming Facebook for myself was lovely, but that does mean if anybody tries to connect with me with Facebook and they're not my friend, I hope they won't be offended if I don't take any notice of their connection. Find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I think that's another conversation as well. But I think it's an interesting one for me. My Facebook profile in the last few months has become almost entirely personal.
Yeah.
Stuff about my family, my kids, what me and Sharon are doing, political rants if I'm sat up late at night with a glass of wine and a newspaper, like last night. Yeah, that's where all of that happens for me. My Facebook and Instagram story is all of the behind the scenes stuff, where I'm at, what I'm doing. My Instagram timeline is mainly business stuff, and my LinkedIn stuff is purely business as well. Apart from the one post about me getting married last year, which did rather well. But apart from that, it's which did rather well. I didn't get married just for the engagement. I didn't say to Sharon, "I've got a great idea."
I was going to say, is Sharon watching this morning?
I hope so. She will be.
You might be in trouble now.
I think Damien's going to be in touch with you, which will be
Great.
absolutely brilliant. I know you guys will have loads of stuff to talk about as well. What else have we got to talk about, John? You do other stuff apart from creating e-learning platforms, and I didn't get this up on screen by mistake actually. So I'm going to bring it up on screen in a second, because as well as creating e-learning platforms and websites, you also write fiction as well.
I do.
Which I've just brought up on the screen on purpose actually, and I've heard the story. I've heard you talking about it at networking events and that sort of thing. How did you end up writing a fiction book? I've written business books, but it must take a completely different skill set and motivation to write a work of fiction. I've got it. If you don't own it, by the way, I've got John's book up on the screen right now, The Boy in Winter's Grasp. You'll find it on Amazon. What led you to do that? What was the story behind that?
Well, I discovered at an early age that if I've got nothing to do with my time, I usually get myself into trouble. So, by that rationale, having something like a novel to write does keep you much more out of pubs than otherwise would be expected. So that in itself is a good thing. Um, but I don't really know where it started. That was the second novel that I wrote. The first novel I wrote about the film industry, based on my days I used to be a first assistant director in the film industry about a million years ago. Um, and then I wrote a novel about that, which was frankly bloody awful. But in the same, they always say everybody's got a book in them. Most people have a terrible book in them, and my first one was absolutely terrible. But it taught me all the things not to do, so that then when I got to this one, which I'm still quite pleased with actually, it was a much easier process perhaps to write it. Um, and other than the fact that I said it in World War One, so there was a lot more research to say the least. But you know what? There's a creative aspect to it, but then there's a creative aspect with a business or factual book as well. So I don't think it's any more or less creative. Um, I think the temptation with fiction, and I certainly did this for my first book, is to start writing and see where the writing takes you, and hope that you don't write yourself into a corner. And that's a terrible way of writing, because you will just write yourself into a corner. With the second one, and with the current one, effectively before I started writing any of the novel, I had a 30-page breakdown of all the chapters telling me exactly what was happening. So at that point, there was no need to be necessarily creative in terms of plot or characterization. You could just become creative with the writing because you knew where you were going with the story. And that, it's like anything, isn't it? It's preparation. That preparation made it a very easy animal to create.
There's all sorts of things that's interesting in that. The most important one I'll come to in a second. The second most important one is that, interestingly, when I wrote Business Networking for Dummies, I didn't know that you had to do it like that, but the publisher had me write the entire section and chapter structure. That was the first thing that we had to do, and that took a couple
Yeah.
of months
Mm-hmm.
to get that all done before we actually started writing the words. And that forced me to think about the narrative running throughout the book and the direction that the book would take, because it needed to have a direction, but also a dummies book you need to be able to read. Every chapter needs to be standalone, and
Yeah.
that structure really helped me. The most important point that you made, which is a huge business lesson, which actually I've talked about recently, is failing to succeed, not being scared to do something which might be a bit crap, because that will lead you to better stuff in the future. You weren't scared to put the, was it that you weren't scared to put the first book out there, or at the time did you believe it was better than it was? But
Oh yeah, no, I thought I was amazing. I just written a novel. I was at the top of my game. It's only reading it back, literally 6 months later, reading it back wasn't even a long time. I was like, this is awful.
but you weren't. I think that's the thing. I guess I was scared. I've got less scared of putting content out there and putting business ideas out there to be shot down in flames, because I occasionally put something out there that doesn't get shot down in flames, and people say, "Oh, that's rather a good idea." But you have to be prepared to put the stuff out there that isn't good as well. And I think that scares a lot of business owners, not putting themselves out there in the first place for fear that someone won't like what they're doing. And you've just summed that up in the lessons that led
Yeah,
to the
totally.
second book. Are you going to write any more?
Yeah, well, the second book, because I like to give myself all types of pain, is the first of a trilogy. Um, so I have got two more to write. However, the second book, I think I self-published it in, I'm going to say 2014, um, and very quickly, through a certain amount of nepotism, because it was somebody that a friend of a friend. A small publishing house based up in Hull called Fantastic Books got in contact with me and told me in no uncertain terms to stop self-publishing it because they wanted to publish it for me instead, um, which is both good and bad. Insofar as they did all the marketing work for it, etc., which was great. But I do occasionally have uncomfortable conversations with Dan, the managing director, going, "Where's the second book?" And as you can imagine, with Tovi and with getting married and having a child, as you know, Steph, in the past, all of that in the past few years, I have a lot less time that I need to keep myself out of the pubs than I used to, and therefore a lot less amount of time for writing. What I've always done um, is when I was, I mean, it probably took me 6, 7 years to write The Boy in Winter's Grasp. And what I used to do is throughout the winter months, I would work 3 weeks on the web development company and take a week somewhere in a self-catering cottage. So I'd have 6 weeks a year that I'd just be in the middle of nowhere in Wales or the middle of nowhere in Northumberland, etc., with an open fire, too many bottles of whiskey, and my laptop. And there's a lot less opportunity to do that now because I've found responsible fatherhood at a late age.
I when I mean I was a father and had a very full time role when I wrote Business Networking for Dummies, and I found micro moments, and I've ended up writing about this. When the car
Mm,
was being serviced, I had a very cheap but good. I got through 3 Chromebooks in the writing of that book because I used to knacker the keyboards off them. But I always used to have a Chromebook with me, and these days I've always got an iPad with me so that if I have a few moments waiting in the car for someone or something like that, I
mm.
can tap some stuff out. And even if it's just a couple of hundred words, it's moved you a bit closer to where you want to be. Interesting that you went off to a cottage. I used to go to co-working spaces.
Okay.
That was where I used to find that a change of scenery would inspire me to write stuff, not least because the coffee was bloody awful and you had to talk to other people. And so I was quite keen to get the job done and get out of there. So I would write down a load of stuff before I left,
Yeah.
with huge deference to the co-working spaces that I used. I'm sure your coffee's not as bad as I remember, but certainly didn't want to sit there for days and days. So that used to spur me into being like super productive and writing a load of words down. Not sure that I'd do terribly well in a cottage with alcohol. I think that the alcohol bit would perhaps take more preference in my life than the actually sitting down and
Yeah,
writing
you
bit.
had to be careful. And I mean, I've done a little bit of what you've done. That was a really good meetup group in Northampton when I used to live there. That we'd all just meet up on a Monday evening, and just spend a couple of hours sitting next to each other, ignoring one another, and working on whatever we were working on. But it was just that collective working. That's really the only time that I felt comfortable like that. As you know, Steph, I don't play nicely with the other children, hence being in this garden office on my own. Um, whenever I've worked, I've always been much more comfortable with being entirely on my own in a room, with some music playing and just getting on with it. That just, for me, that just is a much more productive way to get stuff done. If I've got anybody else with me, I'm just too much of a natterer. I just end up getting nothing done
Yeah,
because I'm giggling and doing irresponsible things.
the only person I've ever shared an office with since I've been self-employed is the wonderful Kerry or Kerry Ann or hello. If you're watching this on replay, apparently I talk very loudly on the phone. So buy very loudly, like no one else can do any work who's around me. So that's something I
Brilliant.
have to bear in mind. And a bit like you, I'm sort of very comfortable in this little office on my own, rather than being around other people. But it did help because it meant
Mhm.
that when I was in that environment, I just wrote, and I can write quite a lot of words in quite a short space of time. And I did the I always liked the 1,000 words a day idea, that you
Yeah.
just write 1,000 words a day. And I think Stephen King does 2,000 words a day. Some of them are great, some of them are rubbish, but at the end of every week, you've got 5,000 or 10,000 words. And there's enough good stuff in there that you can pick it out. I need to get back into that sort of culture for
Yeah.
me. We're going to run out of time quite soon because I know you've got somewhere else to be. So, if anyone's got any questions about e learning or writing books in the last, let's say, 4 or 5 minutes before John has to go, pop them in the comments below, and we'll answer them. If you're watching this on replay, I've tagged John in the post, so pop your questions in the comments below anyway, and we'll get them answered. If we've talked about the process of writing a book, if someone's thinking of their first e-learning course, John, before they do anything, where should they start? What should they start assembling at this stage?
You know what? It's actually not a million miles away from the process of writing a book,
I thought not,
insofar
no.
as most e-learning courses will be broken down into chunks. They'll be called lessons, chapters, modules, units, whatever they happen to be broken down on the e-learning system that you're using. The best thing to do is start with that. Okay, what are my in Toby it's modules. So what are my modules? Um, what is the video going to be in those modules? What does it need to explain? What are the handouts going to be that they can or the downloadables as you're online? What are the downloadables going to be that they can download? And I personally am quite an advocate of whatever you're saying in your video, you need to have a PDF with exactly the same information in it so that your learner can imbibe it in the way that they want. Some are going to be comfortable with watching the video, others are going to watch the video but need to read it as well to take it in. So those two as a minimum for your modules. Then any other downloadables, and how you're going to assess that particular module. So it really is working on the structure first, and then after you've got the structure, the next thing is always going to be getting the videos made. That's the biggest stumbling block I see for people. Um, there's always something more important to do for most people than sit down in front of a camera and start teaching on video, or sit down in front of a microphone and start recording the voiceover that will go with the animation or PowerPoint, however you're doing it, etc. Recording. Um, so schedule yourself time in to do that and then stick to it. In fact, next week I'm actually going over to one of my clients to literally stand behind the camera whilst they record about 4 hours worth of video, so that they can do it to me rather than it being to a camera, because they've been struggling for about 8 months now to get it done. They really want to get it done. And procrastination when it comes to making videos is difficult. The only other things that I would say, and I'm being my own worst enemy because I'm using, oh, you can't even, oh, there you go. I'm using my Blue Yeti today, but I recommend a lapel mic, and I recommend some form of light. I haven't got anything on today, but again, if I pull down on this side, you can see I've got just a little fill light on this side, which I have to switch that on. Just deals with the shadow on this side of the face. And with some very cheap equipment from Amazon, you can turn what would seem like a homemade video into something that's a little bit head and shoulders above. And whilst informal videos with none of that are absolutely fine when you're just doing a diary on LinkedIn or just having a chat when you're not doing it formally, I think when it comes to, if you're selling formal education or you're giving formal education in the event of onboarding and that kind of thing, it needs to my mind, it needs to look more professional than just I'm on a webcam in my room sort of thing. So I'm a strong advocate of getting some good but reasonably priced kit to just push yourself head and shoulders above your rivals.
I I've been out working quite a lot, and my desk is messy, and I've just decided not to do what I was going to do. But for the point of view of people watching, I've got a relatively inexpensive, about 100 quid Logitech camera that I'm talking to that is separate from
Same
the
one as me, I
laptop.
think.
Probably so. I've got natural light coming in that way, and then fake natural light just over there. The benefit, and I've got a Rode NT USB mic just underneath me here on the desk, which makes the sound a little bit better. Actually, because if I just talk to the webcam, that's what people get. Having the Logitech camera just placed above the desk means that I can sit upright and talk to it. From a user's point of view, this is my opinion. Rather than your advice, John, what I've always found works for me is selling the networking success program as a live program and recording that and using the recordings, because then I've got a bit of live interaction whilst I'm doing it, which changes the energy. The other thing is, a little bit like I've been doing today, I read out people's questions along the way. So if anyone asks me a question in the Zoom chat, if I do it as a Zoom webinar, I still use this camera and so on. If anyone asks me a question in the Zoom chat, I can read out the question. Oh, Steve asks, how long should a networking introduction be? That then becomes a useful part of the course for other people as well. I've found doing stuff just dry to camera, I do quite a lot of it, but doing stuff where I'm actually talking to people and I know that there are people the other side of the camera, that changes my energy a bit like talking to you today. And that's always worked for me. I've got, I don't know, 200 or 300 quid's worth of kit here, as well as the iPad and the laptop. It's not a huge amount of stuff, but it does make a difference to the setup and how comfortable I am sat here talking to
Yeah,
the camera, knowing
absolutely.
that you're on the screen down there and I can interact with you. You've, as you've already posted on LinkedIn this morning, I've commented, you've got a house to go and buy, haven't you? So I should let you get off and do that.
Yeah, yeah. That would be. I'm either going to buy that one, but to be honest with you, the negotiations are going in such a way that I'm inclined to be bloody minded and buy a different house, which is both childish and stupid. But that's the mood they put me in. A couple of things before I
Do go
go.
ahead.
Well, actually, one particular thing, because it often gets asked of me in these days of Zoom conferencing and doing stuff to camera. Um, the the Tovi e-learning logo and my name that's currently on screen in front of me is a free bit of software called OBS Studio that anyone watching can freely download. It's open source. And effectively, what it enables you to do is pull your webcam in and then layer images on top, which is exactly what I've done here. And then output that as a virtual webcam that can then be picked up by Zoom, by Teams, etc., etc. So if you are of a mind to brand your camera look and feel a little bit more than perhaps the backgrounds of Zoom will allow, go and have a look at that. And there's plenty of YouTube videos about how to use it as well. But yeah, in case anybody was wondering, that's the kit I use for that bit.
Thank you. I've brought it up on screen. You've mentioned it in several conversations, and I've never actually checked it out. So now I will go and do so. Thank you for that bit of free
No
advice like
worries.
that. Thank you for your time.
No
I've
worries, mate.
enjoyed
That was lots
talking
of
to
fun.
you. No, I enjoyed it. I hope I hope the rest of your day goes all right. I'm going to do two things. Thank you to John for joining us. Thank you to Damien and Roland and Jim Rowe and Jay Blake and Michael Nagels for asking questions or making comments, Michael, along the way. I enjoyed that. I'm going to play us out with the music and then I'm going to press the button to finish this. Enjoy the rest of your day, John, and hope to speak to you later.
You too. Bye bye.